RPG Maker is a name that will surely bring out a lot of memories for certain people, but for those that don't know, it's a game development program that has been in circulation for 30 years and has influenced many developers to start making games themselves. As a result, the amount of games made using it can never truly be fully known, and as obscure, lesser games become, the more likely they'll end up being lost media, only existing in faint glimpses and memories. I find it really fascinating how these kinds of games can get lost despite being released on the internet most of the time. You would think that once something's on the internet, it's in there forever, but that is not actually the case. Files get deleted, creators vanish, and people stop caring until it's too late. But I would like to delve deeper than just a few lost media subjects. I want to discuss the history of the RPG Maker community as a whole, using 3 different subjects from roughly different eras. But enough with the introduction. Let's finally talk about some lost RPG Maker games, shall we? In 2010, a game developer named the Catamites would release an RPG Maker game on itch.io called Space Funeral. Its deliberately amateurish graphics and parodying of popular RPG Maker horror tropes made it an unexpected hit for a while, and it inspired a ton of indie developers to start thinking outside the box of what was to be expected in an indie title. One of these indie developers was a teenage Tumblr user who in 2013 started work on an experimental RPG Maker game called Parade, although the name was not finalized. In it, you played as a cone man going through worlds and fighting with enemies. The game was made in RPG Maker Ace VX and featured 5 different levels. Honestly, this game would have stayed rather obscure if it didn't have 2 notable sections: the title screen and the beginning area. Now, the title screen is, well, a glitch picture of a clown, John Wayne Gacy, a serial killer who often dressed up as a clown for children's parties, and if I kept going this video would be an hour long, so I'm moving on. Second, the forest maze. In this area of the game, an obscure electronic song plays. This obscure electronic song is a part where the singer screams, and as such, if you got stuck in the maze, the game would effectively scream at you. It was never fully completed, although a demo was released on the creator's Tumblr page. Most of this information comes from a Reddit post from r/iceberg charts titled The Weird Messed Up Video Games Iceberg. In it, Parade is in the deepest tier, titled Remothered Emerged. The reason why we know far more about this game than just 2 screenshots is because the creator actually responded to it in the replies. Hello friends. I was told about this thread via an email from someone asking me about this. I am the creator of Parade, aka the Remothered Emerged game. I have to applaud your internet sleuth skills, and just wanted to let y'all know that at this point the game is unfortunately lost. I'm checking my old hard drives and I will let you know if I find anything, but it's unlikely. I don't remember a lot about the game, and those screen caps are a real trip down memory lane. One thing I do remember is that the game was a standard RPG Maker game until it would glitch out a bit, resulting in the odd graphics. Maybe that's what put it in this iceberg? It was a little creepy, yes, but not too offensive. During these replies, they mentioned a gameplay showcase video which was previously unknown to Redditors. Here's a brief snippet. The game's soundtrack was also pretty sparse, ranging from music from the Full Metal Jacket soundtrack to an old Sweatshirt instrumental. The game's ending, according to the creator, was the player character walking to the 15-year-old creator's home and the creator singing along the lines of, "Come back later when I finish the game." Speaking of the creator's teenageness, they do clarify that due to their edginess, they put John Wayne Gacy in the title screen without knowing just how in poor taste it was. The creator remarked that they were sort of ashamed of making it, and have since moved on to better projects. But they end their posting history by saying, "If there ever is a literally Parade Pringles 2, I'll probably be much better at timetables and management, as my art, work ethic, and animation skills have vastly improved since then. I just wouldn't want it to be another RPG Maker game. We have all made amateur games or game ideas at some point in our lives, maybe in Scratch or maybe as a drawing. These ideas grow if you are persistent enough, and they'll eventually blossom into an actual product, but sometimes it's for the best that we leave old ideas behind. That's why RPG Maker is such a persistent force despite its genre evolving throughout so many decades of its existence. Its do-it-yourself nature makes it practically immortal in a way. Clock Tower is a 1995 horror game released on the Super Nintendo by Human Entertainment. The game stars Jennifer and her friends who get adopted by a rich guy after all their parents' sudden death. But before they get used to the place, an antagonist known as the Scissor Man stalks and kills them all one by one. This is a very condensed description, but you get the idea. It's well known for being one of the earliest survival horror games, and of course its influence managed to reach the RPG Maker scene. From Aoni to Corpse Body, they all managed to be influenced by Clock Tower in small yet significant ways. But one title that was being developed in the 2000s was more than an homage to it. It was an entire remake, and it was called Remothered. The idea for Remothered came from game developer Chris Darrell, who in 2007 released concept art for a Clock Tower fan tribute. Later that year, the first version of the game was started, using RPG Maker XP. It featured a character named Jennifer and her friends. This build is very mysterious among the community, and as such, we will only briefly mention it here. Now for the second version. In 2009, the game started full development, and many changes were made to the original story and characters. Certain differences include changes in character names, entirely new characters, and related to the new characters, multiple antagonists other than the Scissor Man who would stalk the player and her friends. The story was different from the original, but we only know about the first 30 minutes of it. The known story ends abruptly as Jennifer finds out there's a serial killer inside the mansion. And now we turn to the third and final version. This one was started in 2011 and featured 3 playable characters: Jennifer, her friend Lindsay, and their tutor, Rosemary Seed. The adopted women from the original were changed from young adults to teenagers, and as such, their designs were significantly altered to make them look younger. Near the end of development, the game's graphic style was changed from 2D to 3D. The game's story is also pretty insane. Here's the final paragraph of the story in the Remothered wiki. Suddenly, one girl after another starts to disappear, and it is up to Jennifer and the remaining girls to solve the mystery around the Baroni family and find a way out of the accursed house, filled with crazy assassins and worshippers of the devil's cult. Yeah, moving on. It was also apparently going to get released on the Wii U, but those were just speculations and it wasn't really fully confirmed. In the end, the game was cancelled due to unknown reasons, with it barely resembling the game it was going to be a remake of. A sequel was announced just before the game's cancellation, which is weird, but it's kinda sad to think about in all honesty. The game's soundtrack was released prior to cancellation, and I suggest you check it out if you're into ambient horror game OSTs. Now, the reason why this game has a wiki isn't because of its lost media importance, rather it's because the game actually came out. The game restarted development in 2016 as a fully original game with the ideas from the latest version. It's been pretty successful and has received praise. It even spawned a sequel in 2020. The development of this game is nothing short of a miracle in my eyes. A small indie game with RPG Maker that grew into a big release is kind of inspirational in a way, even though the original build was lost and it's no longer a remake. And with that, the story of Remothered ends, and our second case closes. In mid-2004, an enigmatic Japanese game developer named Kikiyama released the first version of a game titled Dream Diary, although you most likely know it by its original Japanese name, Yume Nikki. In it, you play as a Japanese shut-in known as Madotsuki, and the game takes place entirely within her dreams, with you only experiencing the outside world in brief segments. The entire game features no dialogue, no combat, and nothing relating to a story. Every single door leads to another, with each one being stranger than the one before. It has received gradual cult classic status, with many people considering it the progenitor of a ton of indie games in general. But before it achieved that, it was quite obscure. Let me explain. Yume Nikki began development sometime in early 2003. We know this thanks to a version of the game we'll talk about later. Kikiyama was a musician and posted some of their unfinished music from the game on their defunct music page. Take a listen to a track posted before the game's release, and the music used in the game when it actually came out. This leads us to the game's actual release, June 26, 2004. The first version of the game was released on the Japanese file sharing website. The only thing we have of this build is a single screenshot and a changelog. The single screenshot comes from Kikiyama's music account and features a slightly different version of Madotsuki's room. It's smaller and has objects on different places. The second, third, and fourth versions are not very notable in the development of the game. The reason being, well, we just don't have any info on them. The real star of the show is version 0.04, the earliest version of the game we have, and the story of how we got it in the first place is really insane. You see, this version of the game was originally released on a Japanese magazine titled
フリーウェア年間2005
In 2015, a Twitter user tweeted that they were in possession of the magazine and in turn, the demo itself. They streamed the version for a while, but never released it to the public. And as such, this demo wouldn't be found for quite some time. Until 2016, when Spanish YouTuber Eloizilo would start an archival group dedicated to finding the Yume Nikki demos called
La investigación Yume Nikki.
Their search would soon turn fruitful, as in July 2017, Eloy would announce that they managed to get a copy of the magazine that contained the demo disc. And that demo disc was version 0.06. This version included a ton of different things, but to talk about these different things, we should go to the next version that was found by the team, version 0.04. Dumped online by Gatobot. The main differences start from the graphics. The game is still very unfinished, and many effects and levels are straight up missing. And only 20 effects instead of the 25 in the final release, including some that were later scrapped, like Grayscale and Will-O-Wisp, and only 83 maps instead of the 179 in the current version. Because of this, the maps that are in the game are somewhat different from the final build. A great example of this is the Hell map being 2 times smaller than the final version. Map differences are usually them being smaller or some areas being removed in future versions. All of these differences, however, are nothing compared to a single file that contained dozens and dozens of images titled thumbs.db. And boy, the images here are quite interesting. Early versions of map sprites are, of course, to be expected, but there are also pictures of real-life areas not used in any version. Unused background characters from the worlds also exist. There is also a cut minigame featured in the images. It was supposedly going to be a minigame where you kick the head of an unknown character into a goalpost. The character used in the image is black and white, similar to Monoka and Monoe, although it's unknown if they are related in any way. The last important thing about the folder is the dates when every file was created. These are notable because they actually give us a time and date in which Yume Nikki most likely began development. A small portion of the sprites are from 2003, a year before the release of the game, confirming that the game started development sometime around 2002 and 2003. That's where the interesting things found in this version of the game end. The newer versions found by the team have unused graphics similar to version 4. Version 008 is notable because it is the first version to feature Uboa, the creepy rare Easter egg that became sort of like the main mascot of Yume Nikki once it was discovered. And that's about it. I have to commend
La investigación Yume Nikki
for their phenomenal work on preserving and finding all Yume Nikki builds. Go check out Eloizilo's channel if you can. He does some cool gameplay of Yume Nikki fan games and other oddities. Yume Nikki's influence and more broadly the influence of RPG Maker is something that has continued to persist even after so many years of its existence. And with Amori coming out in 2020 and capturing the imaginations of millions of people, it's likely going to stay that way for decades to come. With RPG Maker, anyone can create a forgettable video game, but you need to have a truly great idea to make something last for generations to come.